When was the last time you played a multiplayer game and didn't feel like you had something to prove? To your team, to the enemy, to your rank, to yourself? Because when I played multiplayer games, that feeling has always been there. And then Arc Raiders came along, and something shifted. Not because it removed competition, but because it gave me the permission to ignore it. You see, I've spent years in competitive ecosystems, whether that's Counter-Strike, Valorant, Overwatch. Different mechanics and different pacing, yes, but the same psychological structure. You queue to win. Even if you say to yourself you're playing casually, the systems are built around performance and you can't avoid them. There's visible ranks, hidden MMR, win-loss ratios, stat tracking and competitive ladders. And every engagement becomes a micro test. Every death or loss feels like failure, and every clutch feels like validation. You are always being measured, and after years of that, you do start to internalize it. You stop asking whether you want to compete. You just become accustomed to that's what multiplayer must be. And then enter Arc Raiders, which on paper is still a multiplayer game. Yes, there is PvP, there's loot scarcity and high value zones where we must compete with other players for blueprints, arc materials, weapons and more. But it doesn't feel the same, because the game doesn't force confrontation, it just simply allows it, and that's a massive difference. In Arc Raiders then, I've had raids where I've avoided every single player. I've watched a squad fight from a hilltop and chosen never to engage. I've extracted merely with scraps. I've lost everything and just laughed it off. I've spent 10 minutes listening and engaging in proximity chat chaos. I've roleplayed as a field medic, and I've wandered like a tourist with nothing but a pair of binoculars, taking pictures and recording video footage for this very channel. And with all of that being said, this game has never punished me for those identity choices. There was no "you played wrong" here, there was no system pushing me toward optimal combat routes. It just simply let me exist in the world. And that's rare in gaming nowadays. And most competitive multiplayer games funnel you towards combat. Maps are structured to create choke points, objectives force collision, and timers pressure engagement. Arc Raiders does include these too, but it gives you space, and space changes behaviour. If I want high tier loot, I can go and contest it, but if I don't, I simply don't have to. And here's the part that people overlook. You can actively choose not to engage, even when engagement is presented to you, and that's where the real player agency lies. Now let's talk about something interesting then, because the lobbies that we play can of course vary in tone. Some are hyper aggressive and some feel surprisingly quiet. And if you're willing to experiment and queue differently and even play differently, adjust your tempo maybe, you can influence the type of experience you land in. Of course, here I'm referring to the aggression-based matchmaking system within the game. So if a lobby does feel toxic, then just extract quickly, re-queue, reset your approach. You're not trapped within the toxic energy. In ranked shooters, you're locked in for 30 to 45 minutes minimum. Your performance matters, leaving has consequences such as queue timers or leaderboard and rank punishments. Arc Raiders though gives you the flexibility, and flexibility lowers the psychological pressure. Now let's be honest. There are of course PvP focused lobbies that are sweaty in this game, like any other shooter. There is proximity chat toxicity. There are players who only log in to want to try and dominate. That environment exists. But the key difference is this. You are not required to participate in that mindset. You can simply observe it if you choose to. You can avoid it. You can outplay it or just simply outlast it. And when competition becomes optional, instead of mandatory, the emotional intensity drops dramatically. Now there's also a foundational concept in motivational psychology that's called self-determination theory, which I've discussed in previous videos. It argues that human motivation revolves around three core needs: autonomy, competence, relatedness. And most competitive shooters lean heavily into the competence of these core needs. You improve, you grind, you climb. Arc Raiders leans heavily into autonomy and relatedness though. You can choose your risk tolerance, your engagement level, your social identity and tactical posture, while also feeling a sense of belonging with others and connecting with them too. And that's a powerful combination, and when players feel autonomous, our frustration tolerance increases. Losses feel self-authored instead of system-imposed, and that changes how you emotionally process a defeat. And this might sound strange, but philosophically, this actually reminds me a lot of what Baldur's Gate 3 achieved under Larian Studios. Not genre-wise, of course, but structurally at its foundation. Baldur's Gate 3 succeeded because it trusted players with choice. There were dialogue choices, moral choices, build choices, and outcome variants. The replayability exploded because agency was embedded into the very foundation of the game. Arc Raiders, in its own multiplayer extraction format, feels built on a similar philosophy. Let the player decide what kind of experience they're here for, and that's honestly not very common in PvP-enabled environments. So here's what's genuinely interesting. After spending significant time in Arc Raiders, I've found myself less reactive in other games I've played. I'm less tilted, I'm less obsessed with performance metrics. It's almost like a pressure valve has been loosened, because Arc Raiders reminded me that multiplayer doesn't have to be about proving dominance. A game in this genre can simply be about immersion, atmosphere, lore, map design, and environmental storytelling. And when you shift from how do I win to how do I exist within this world, then everything slows down. Another key point here, the maps are built to be soaked in. There's verticality, there is space, and there are some quiet zones. You're not funneled from fight to fight. You can literally play the game like a survival documentary. You can observe squads, you can watch engagements unfold and just let the world breathe. And that breathing room changes your nervous system response. You're not permanently on edge, you're selectively alert, and that genuinely feels like a healthier loop. And here's where the research and analytics matter. Extraction style games thrive on tension cycles. We have high risk, we then have relief. We have loss, we have re-entry. But Arc Raiders softens the mandatory PvP edge by allowing the disengagement, and that means that tension becomes elective. Elective tension feels exciting. Mandatory tension, though, feels stressful. And over the duration of a play session, that difference compounds. I don't have access to enough data, but I wouldn't be surprised if longer session times correlate with mixed aggression lobbies versus the only hyper sweaty ones, which probably have shorter times. Autonomy sustains engagement here better than pressure. So Arc Raiders hasn't made me less competitive here, it's just made me aware of when I'm choosing to be competitive, and that's a massive distinction. It's reduced the subconscious compulsion to optimise every second or every time I step topside. Sometimes I choose to loot and sometimes I lose. Sometimes I extract nothing of value and it still feels worthwhile, because I chose the experience I had, not the system. So what's the core takeaway then? Well, multiplayer doesn't need to equal pressure. It can equal exploration, role identity, observation, experimentation, controlled risk. Arc Raiders works, at least for me, because it respects our agency in a genre that usually strips it away, and that design choice is powerful. So if you've got this far with me and you've also spent years in ranked ecosystems like I have, then ask yourself this: are you playing to win? Or are you playing because you love the world that you're in? Because if Arc Raiders is changing that equation for you too, then I'd genuinely like to hear how. Please drop your experience in the comments below, and of course if you enjoy these deeper breakdowns where we analyse not just the game but what it does to us psychologically, then consider subscribing to the channel. Because this conversation about player agency, competition, game design, it's just another piece of the puzzle as to why Arc Raiders has been so successful so far and may just continue to be. So until next time, Raider, I'll see you topside.